Hello and welcome to Psychological Insights. As you see, we're still working remotely. We're in the era of the coronavirus pandemic. A special shout out, a special thank you goes out to our technicians and to our executive director, Jennifer Evans, for making all this happen. Thank you, WHCI. Today's topic is anger. So where's all this anger coming from? We see it with people going postal, a disgruntled employee, or what about in our political leadership? There seems to be anger in the air. Or is it in the air? Is it just from us? Is it some primal instinct? And is anger good for you? I mean, should temperance be lauded or should anger be applauded? Today we'll be speaking to Dr. Robert Hamm. He's a psychologist in West Hartford Center, and he's an expert in all things psychological. I'm Pat Kazakoff. Stay with me. Hello, Dr. Hamm.
Hi there, Pat. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you. So you heard my entrance. So tell me about this thing called anger. What is it? What is anger all about? And why are we so focused on anger? Why do we have these disgruntled employees? Why do we have politics? There's so much anger. What's this about?
Well, first of all, anger is just a basic human emotion. I think that even probably in the animal kingdom, it's just one of the qualities that we have inherited as animals to express ourselves, to signal to ourselves what is going on in our environment. So it helps us to know how we should respond. So it's a normal, healthy thing to have an emotion. And anger is one of the basic emotions that we have. So there's nothing wrong with anger at all. In fact, it's healthy. It's part of what we need in order to survive.
But why do some people have so much anger? I mean, clearly when a person goes postal, that's not healthy. It's not healthy for them, and it's not healthy for the people who are affected. Why do some people have so much anger?
Yeah, well, I think that that's a simple question to a very, I think that warrants a very complex kind of answer. There are different reasons. Um, so you were talking about, the environment, what's happening today, um, and our political atmosphere, our political climate. There's an awful lot of, I think, animosity that exists that's ramped up by the media. Personally, I believe that contributes to a lot of the anger. Um, so the world that we live in today is very divisive. So politics are divisive, and you have all of these media today that are available that people are tapped into. And if you're only hearing your own tribe's um, message, it creates divisiveness, and that divisiveness contributes to a feeling of resentment and entitlement and animosity.
So what about the personal? I mean, you deal mostly with the personal, people who have personal anger. How does that anger how does a person go postal? Like what's inside of themselves that they feel so angry? It can't just be the environment. It's got to be something inside of them.
Well, yes, certainly, it's a combination of what's inside of us, and emotions are something that we're born with, is having the ability to feel and express. But of course, like everything else, what we feel is a function of what's happening in our lives and in the world around us. So if you are living a life that is frustrating, if you're unhappy, If there are stresses in your life that are chronic in nature and you don't see a solution to them, it can lead to a lot of anger. And if you don't have a way to vent in an appropriate way, it can build up and then come out in inappropriate and destructive ways. So I think to some degree, I mean, it's a function of the state of our society, but also, uh, again, getting back to the media, certain events that are awful, a mass shooting, for example, are broadcast. It's newsworthy. That's the stuff that news, feeds off of. So it's sensationalized, and therefore creates a bias that makes us believe that it's worse than it is. Now, that said, that doesn't mean that it isn't a bellwether about certain kinds of problems that exist in our society. But I think there is a distortion there too, created by the media.
Well, so you're a psychologist, you work with people on a daily basis. They come in and they discuss anger with you. Can you predict who's going to be angry at such a level that they're going to go postal? Like, can you predict that? Is there some sort of way? Do they have some indicators in their presentation to you where you would say, this is someone we've got to watch for?
You can't make accurate predictions about a person's behavior. The behavior is too complicated, and what determines what people will do in any given situation. There are risk factors that we look at. As I identified, if a person has a history of depression or mental illness, obviously, such as bipolar disorder, major depression, a personality disorder, or if there's some kind of organic brain dysfunction that could contribute to impulsivity, these things, chemical dependence. Those are risk factors, but also the environmental factors. A person who doesn't have a good support system, they're unemployed, there there's a history of a person having difficulty with the law. All of these things can contribute. But if I'm seeing a patient in my office and I see that what they're talking about, resentments or inability to find appropriate resources to help them manage their emotions, these are risk factors that would tip me off with regard to what's the likelihood. But I cannot make an accurate prediction. There's too many variables involved, and so we can only make guesses and who's most at risk.
Right. So do you, have you identified people before indeed they've done something like you've said, this is a person at risk, and then something happens that's way beyond sort of acceptable in society? Has that happened to you in your practice?
Not exactly. I did, years ago, I saw a patient who had a lot of issues in his life, and economically, socially. And so I hadn't seen him again for many years. And then later I found out in the news that he had murdered somebody. But there's no way, when I was seeing that patient, that I would have been able to predict that. You can see, 100 patients with the same problems, same profile, and there'll never be any violence. It's so hard. You can see risk factors, but it's almost impossible to make a prediction.
So you can see risk factors, but you can't predict a violent behavior. You can't predict behavior.
Well, you can say there's, the more risk factors there are, the increases the likelihood. But it's, unless someone is saying, well, I'm really going to get this guy, I am going to do something, that's imminent risk, in which we have a duty to warn in our profession. No, it's really almost impossible to make an accurate prediction.
Well, right at the beginning, you talked about that anger. You said, I recall you saying that anger is a good thing. Like, at what are the circumstances that make anger a good thing?
Well, all human emotions are there for a reason. Emotions help us to understand what's going on inside of ourselves, in our environment, so that we know what we can do to address whatever is going on. It reflects, it communicates to other people our responses. And so it helps other people to gauge what's going on with us so that we can, uh, be able to solve our problems or be with one another in a way that we help one another, I think, ultimately. Um, so I think anger is a way of telling us that something's not right, and we need to do something. Now, there's different kinds of ways of responding to something not right. Uh, we could respond with fear, um, or we could respond in a way that without emotion and just kind of be able to think in a more problem-solving intellectual way. But anger it elicits aggression. And so what we do with that aggression is up to us. We can take it out on ourselves. We can take it out at the party that threatens us or that insults us. That's usually what elicits anger, some kind of threat.
Well, but do you feel like, is there a way to feel anger? Like, do I know if I'm feeling, I mean, I know what aggressive behavior is because I do aggressive behavior, but what about feeling? Like, some people deny their feelings. So how would you say to yourself, oh, this is anger, I need to deal with it intellectually as opposed to shooting somebody? I'm being a little dramatic here. So what is the feeling inside that tells me this is anger?
Well, that's a very good question because some people don't know, and they're not in touch with their emotions. So um, there are certain physiological signs. You can, feel your, let's say excuse me, your face getting hot. You can feel that your hands are clenching. You would feel your blood pressure rising, your heart racing. Um, and if you're with a person who's angry, their teeth might be sort of gritted, and their brows furrowed, and there's a change in their voice quality. I mean, there are certain signs that tips us off that we or someone we're with is angry. Um, so some people are not aware of it. So we might work with people who have difficulty in managing their emotions. I try to help them to identify their anger when it starts to occur early in the process.
But what you're
They're more able
describing,
to manage it. Yeah.
what you're describing to me is like physiological processes, like your hands getting hot, your face getting hot, you're clammy, maybe you have to go to the bathroom. I mean, these are all pretty physical.
Right.
And isn't it easy to make a mistake and say this isn't anger, but maybe this is sadness? Is it easy to make mistakes?
Um, I don't, no, I mean, with the symptoms that I just described, I think it's pretty clear that that's not sadness. Now, sometimes sadness can create anger. It can lead to anger, but no, it's pretty clear. Uh, the physiological manifestations of anger, and some people are not aware of them. So in my work with a patient, I'll help them to try to identify so that it doesn't get to the point where they act on it destructively. And the earlier that you can identify your emotions, the more control you have. When you're in a high pitch of emotion, it's very hard to control yourself because the primitive part of your brain takes over. You can't think rationally. You do things that you regret. So it's a very good question that you asked. Part of my work in helping patients who have anger management issues is to help them to identify right off the bat what's happening inside their bodies and in their thoughts too, cognitively. What are they thinking in that moment? Um, paying attention to your thoughts and your physical response helps you to identify your emotions. Mhm.
So now that I know what the physiological changes are in my body, and let's say I'm able to identify them, what do I do now? Because what I want to do is kill you and scream at you and pound you over the head. But that doesn't seem to be really constructive. So what am I supposed to do now that I've identified this anger? What's the right thing to do?
Well, I mean, if your anger is at a pitch that you want to kill somebody or hurt them, I'd say the best thing to do is to refrain from acting and instead uh, recuse yourself and take a walk, take some deep breaths, do some meditation, calm down. It's never a good idea. You know, if you're angry at someone, you write an email to them. They always say, you know, don't send it, just write it and wait another day. Wait till you're calmer before you address the issue with the party that you have a gripe with.
That would be a little complicated because you said part of it is that it's primal, that you can't help it. It's just like a primal instinct to sort of lash out. So how do you control yourself enough? Like all of a sudden you start meditating? That sounds to me a little bit, it doesn't sound realistic.
Oh, no, no, no. Anger is like all emotions, it's on a spectrum of severity. So if you can, as I was saying, if you can identify anger early in the process, where it's not primal, I'm not sure what you mean by that, but it's, you know, when your anger is at a pitch that it gets to a point of rage, or you're livid, that's hard to control. And that's when it's too late to express yourself. You've got to recuse yourself and calm down. But if you can identify it early and your limbic system isn't, you know, shooting signals to the primitive part of your brain that, you know, tells you to survive the fight flight reaction. If you're more at um, a tempered pitch, you can deal with the situation in the moment. That's not primal. Primal meaning more primitive, being very extreme. Some people react extremely instantaneously, and you know, that's another issue. Often that's a sign that something's not right. There might be trauma there, or some situations call for it when there's an urgent matter. But usually anger is something that happens in a more graduated process. It's not primal unless we allow it to build to that pitch. So you have that control if you catch it early on. And if you don't, then you have to recuse yourself and meditate or do your deep breathing exercises to relax.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. What I'm having a hard time understanding is that let's say you've identified this anger and you've identified what the right reaction is, and your right reaction is either to leave the situation, go for a walk, go to meditate. But I can see how frustrating that would be for your partner if your partner was there, that all of a sudden the person leaves or all of a sudden they start meditating. I mean, it would be really, really anger producing if that's what your partner did.
Yeah, I mean, it is almost comical the way you described it. It it's not quite doesn't quite go that way. You're right. If you it would be disrespectful if someone is trying to engage you about something they're angry about and you ignore them. No, of course you don't do that directly. You talk with your partner. If you feel that you cannot deal with a situation in a rational way, uh, you're responsible for managing and taking control of yourself. So you have to tell the other party that this is not going to go well unless you recuse yourself. And when you do that, you do make it clear, let's say, in working with couples who have arguments or they have conflict, you tell your partner that you're not sweeping things under the rug. You're just managing your emotions and that you'll get back to it, the discussion another time. You can set a time with your partner when we can discuss it, but it's ill-advised under any circumstances to deal with conflict when you are very angry. It never goes well. You know?
Is that speaking from personal experience, or is that just from an educated opinion? It doesn't go well.
Oh, of course, from personal experience and educate. I mean, it's universal. You know, maybe the exception is if you live in Italy. You know, where it's acceptable in the culture to be temperamental. Um, but you know, by and large, it's not a good thing to be so angry that your main mission is to inflict harm, to, to do damage. It only makes a bad situation worse.
Yeah, no, I think what you've introduced is the concept of taking a break, but not just taking a break, but announcing the break. In other words, you don't just leave in a moment of conflict. What you do is you acknowledge, I'm really angry. I'm really having a hard time dealing with this. So I'm going to go take a walk. I'm going to take a walk, but it's not that I don't want to talk about this. I just need a break until I can gather my thoughts. I think that's probably really a necessary part of the equation of managing
Absolutely.
anger.
That's what I'm saying. That's right. Yep. But I do also want to say that I think in today's society, anger has a bad rap. So um, in my, I wrote a blog a couple of years ago, can we be positive that negative emotions are bad? Um, so I think because of the sensationalizing of anger and rage reactions and mass murders, that people, many people believe that anger is not a good thing. Um, and so for that reason, some people disavow that they're angry. And it's so important, I think, to be aware that anger is healthy. It's important to recognize when you have it. Otherwise, you can confuse your partner, the person you're with. If you say, no, I'm not angry when you are, another person can become confused. They may then feel that there's something wrong with them. So that's called gaslighting. Um, so I think it's very important uh, for us to understand that anger is a healthy emotion. It's how we express it that really determines whether it's constructive or not.
So given that it's a positive emotion, how do you manage it besides taking yourself away from the situation, besides meditating, besides heavy breathing? I mean, how do you manage it inside of yourself so you don't get to that point?
Well, I think that it's, first of all, important to be able to identify what your emotions are when you have them, as we were talking about earlier. Um, and then when you do identify whether you're angry or not, ask yourself, why am I angry? And so that you don't misdirect. If you're not aware of what's causing it, you can take it out on the wrong party. You know, someone, you know, you're in a bad mood and take it out on whoever is available, or someone that is an easy mark, so to speak. That's called displacement. It's important to find out what's causing my anger. Where should I direct it, first of all? And then finally, how should I express it? About uh, communicating with your partner, doing it in a way that you can talk with them in a civil tone, um, being specific. So rather than calling them names or shouting, um, Be specific about what it is that the person that you're angry at did, um, rather than attacking them, their character, their person. Um, and when you're communicating often about your feelings of anger with another person, you're likely to elicit defensive. The conflict in most instances. So it's helpful also to try to put yourself in the other person's shoes to understand what their reaction would be, what they may be feeling, um, what they're, so that you engage them in a way that they're willing to be more open to hearing what you're angry about.
So what should, given that that an angry person approaches you and they sort of tell you what's wrong with you, what should the other person's reaction be that's a healthy reaction and that de-escalates the situation? What should the responder do?
Well, sort of what I was just describing. I mean, it's rather than become defensive or avoid the situation, to that they're angry about. Why are they angry? Um, without agreeing or disagreeing immediately, try to find out what's going on. So that you know that you show that you are not running away from the problem, you're not fending them off. You're, unless you have reason to believe otherwise, that you're treating them with respect, that there might be some validity to their feelings, or even if you disagree with the reasons for their anger, nonetheless validating the fact that they are angry, that they themselves at least have a reason in their minds to feel angry. So the first step is to validate another person's feelings before going any further in trying to understand whether or not that person's reasons for feeling angry were valid or not.
I could see how that would be difficult to do. I could see how you could have a little bit of a challenge validating the other person's angry feelings. But I could also see, like, intellectually that that's the only thing to do, to acknowledge the anger, to acknowledge that they have a point. I mean, that is the only thing to do. And hopefully most of the people that you're dealing with are healthy people and have like you said, that anger was on a spectrum. It's a spectrum emotion. And usually you'll be effective in dealing with them. Anything else to say, Dr. Hamm, on this?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, I think that, it's important to realize that even if you are empathic and attempting to validate another person's emotions, it doesn't mean you're agreeing with them. But you do that in order to show them that you're respecting them, and that helps to de-escalate their anger. That helps them to feel that they're being heard. And at that point, it gives you, both parties, an opportunity to try to get at the bottom of what the issue is, so that the problem can be resolved. It opens up the possibility for there to be communication. Otherwise, if their feelings are not validated um, by responding with a defensive reaction, or running away, or denying their emotion, it escalates. If you get defensive, what's their likely response? They're going to be even angrier. So from a practical standpoint, it's always better to try to engage in an empathic way with someone who's angry.
Yeah, I can see how the system makes sense, but I can see how you can be a target for over intellectualizing. And you can sound as if the sympathy can sound a little bit too intellectual. It can sound as if you're pacifying them, that you're patronizing them. I can see that you really have to be on a delicate balance. It's really a delicate balance between validating someone and patronizing them. That's also a spectrum.
Yeah, no, I could see that. A person might feel that you're just um, kind of in a robotic way trying to pacify them. But, I mean, I think that there has to be a genuine engagement where you are showing concern about what that person is upset about. How else are you going to be able to help them to resolve the issue with you? So if a person doesn't feel that your response is genuine, um, uh, I'm not sure what your alternatives would be. You could ask them, well, what would help them to feel that your response is genuine and caring if they feel that you're just being dismissive or patronizing. Um, it, yeah, it's not an easy process, and sometimes it takes some work if you're in a relationship for issues to get ironed out. Um, it does sometimes take time and effort to try to resolve a conflict.
And I can also see that some things are just not resolvable. When you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, not everything is resolvable. Sometimes it's just the way it is, and you have to move on to the next situation.
Sometimes we have to agree to disagree. That's right. I mean, when you try to, after you feel that the both of you are on the same page as far as acknowledging what the person's angry about, that's when you try to resolve the issue. And if that can't be resolved, sometimes you have to agree to disagree. And if you're in a relationship, unless it's a big problem, then sometimes that's okay. If it's a big problem, sometimes it can be, uh, an issue that will not go away.
Well, I can see how this is a complex issue, and I can see that anger ain't going away. It's not going away in the news so quickly, and it's not going away in our personal lives so quickly. We've been talking to Dr. Robert Hamm in West Hartford. You can see his telephone number if you want to contact him, his telephone number and his email, his website. Dr. Hamm, thank you very, very much. Do we know what next month's topic is going to be yet?
No, that's still in the works. I haven't decided yet, but thank you for asking.
So thank you, Dr. Hamm. Thank you once again, WHCI, Jennifer Evans, and thank you all the technicians for making this happen. I hope that next month we won't have to do this remotely, but until then, thank you again and goodbye.